Hollywood likes to sell us dreams, but behind those glossy posters and glamorous premieres are stories that could break your heart. The golden age of cinema wasn't all champagne and chandeliers. It was also built on secrets, shame, betrayal, and unimaginable pain. For every perfectly posed red carpet photo, there was a lie hidden in the shadows. For every happily ever after the studios promoted, there was a tragedy they covered up. These weren't just actors, they were survivors, pretenders, and prisoners of a system that demanded perfection at any cost. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the 23 celebrities with the most horrifying secret lives, and we begin with stories that are as shocking as they are heartbreaking. Bobby Darin, the star who didn't know who he was. Bobby Darin was the definition of charisma, the teen idol whose hits like Splish Splash and Mac the Knife made him a household name. He had the swagger of someone born to be famous, but Bobby's career was driven by something much darker, the knowledge that he might not live long enough to enjoy it. Diagnosed with a severe heart condition as a child, doctors told him he'd be lucky to see 30. That ticking clock became the soundtrack of his life. He raced through success, writing, singing, acting, even marrying Sandra Dee, determined to squeeze a lifetime into a few short years. But at 32, the biggest blow of all hit him, and it had nothing to do with his health. Bobby discovered that the woman he had called his beloved sister his entire life was in fact his mother. And the woman he thought was his mother, she was actually his grandmother. It was a family lie born of shame. His biological mother had been just 17 when she gave birth, and in the 1930s, an unmarried teenage mother was scandalous. So the family rewrote reality. For Bobby, it was as if his entire identity had been erased. He retreated from the spotlight, grew a beard, and reinvented himself as a folk singer, a man searching for the truth about who he was. When he died at 37, 7 years beyond his expected lifespan, he was still trying to reconcile the lie he'd been raised in with the person he truly was. Raymond Burr, the man who invented a family. Raymond Burr was the face of justice. As Perry Mason, he was television's unshakable courtroom crusader, confident, commanding, and trustworthy. But the man who seemed to have it all together on screen was living a lie so elaborate it could have been one of his own scripts. In the 1950s, being openly gay in Hollywood was a career death sentence. Burr knew it, so he created a fictional life. He told the press he had been married to a woman named Annette who had tragically died in a plane crash. He even claimed to have a son who had died from leukemia. Burr spoke about their wedding, their home, and even his son's favorite toy, all details conjured from thin air. None of it was real. The tragic wife, the lost son, pure fiction. In reality, Burr was quietly living with his partner, Robert Benavides, on a vineyard they shared for over 3 decades. What's remarkable is that behind this enormous lie was a man of extraordinary compassion. Burr secretly paid for surgeries for sick children, covered tuition for kids in foster care, and funded countless causes, never seeking recognition. His public persona may have been fabricated, but his kindness was real, and it revealed a deeper truth that even under the crushing weight of secrecy, love and humanity can still flourish. Marilyn Monroe, the lonely child behind the icon. Marilyn Monroe's life looked like a fairy tale, the orphan who became Hollywood's ultimate sex symbol. But behind the dazzling smile and the platinum hair was a life marked by trauma and heartbreak. Born Norma Jean Baker, Marilyn spent her childhood shuffled between 11 foster homes, never knowing real stability. Her mother was institutionalized, and she grew up terrified of being abandoned, a fear that followed her into adulthood. Her breathy, seductive voice, often imitated, wasn't a calculated act. It was the result of a childhood stutter and deep-seated insecurity. Even her first marriage at just 16 was less about love and more about survival, a way to avoid being sent back to an orphanage. Hollywood transformed her into an icon, but Norma Jean never stopped feeling like that scared, unwanted child. She sought love and validation from powerful men, including presidents, but relationships crumbled and the loneliness remained. Behind closed doors, she battled insomnia, panic attacks, and depression, numbing the pain with pills and alcohol. Her tragic death at 36, alone, overdosed and misunderstood, wasn't just the end of a glamorous life. It was a brutal reminder of how Hollywood exploits pain, packages it as fantasy, and then discards the person once the illusion fades. Clark Gable and Loretta Young, a daughter erased. In 1935, Clark Gable was the king of Hollywood, and Loretta Young was one of its brightest rising stars. But behind the cameras of The Call of the Wild, an affair would produce a scandal so dangerous, the studio system conspired to bury it completely. Loretta became pregnant, a career-ending disaster in an era when being an unmarried mother was unforgivable, so she vanished from the public eye. Months later, she adopted a baby girl from an orphanage. What the world didn't know was that the baby was her own daughter. Judy Lewis grew up believing she was adopted, all while wondering why she looked so much like Clark Gable. The truth was whispered about in Hollywood circles, but never publicly admitted. Gable refused to acknowledge her. Young denied it until Judy confronted her with the evidence as an adult. The deception ran deep. Judy's ears were even surgically altered to make her resemble Gable less. It was an erasure of identity designed to protect reputations, not a child. But Judy refused to be defined by the lie. She became an actress and later an advocate for children's rights. Young, consumed by guilt, confessed the truth late in life. Gable never spoke a word. Jack Nicholson, the truth that changed everything. Jack Nicholson has always had a reputation for being larger than life, rebellious, magnetic, and effortlessly cool. But the most dramatic twist of his life came not from a script, but from a reporter's question. At 37, Nicholson was stunned to learn that the woman he believed was his older sister was actually his mother. Pregnant as a teenager, she had concealed the scandal by letting her parents raise Jack as their own child. For nearly 4 decades, he had lived in a carefully constructed lie. The revelation came too late for closure. Both women had died by the time he learned the truth. Nicholson's reaction, however, wasn't anger. It was reflection. "I'd like to think they did the best they could," he later said. The discovery didn't destroy him. If anything, it deepened his sense of self and added to the complex layers that have always defined his performances. The man known for his devil-may-care attitude had, at his core, a profound understanding of identity and its fragility. Spencer Tracy, A Life of Love and Guilt. Spencer Tracy was Hollywood royalty, the embodiment of virtue and strength on screen, but his real life was a complex balancing act between faith, guilt, and forbidden love. Tracy married Louise Treadwell in 1923, and together they had a son who was born deaf, an event that Tracy interpreted as divine punishment. Haunted by guilt and bound by his Catholic faith, divorce was out of the question, but fidelity was, apparently, negotiable. Enter Katharine Hepburn, one of the most celebrated actresses of all time and Tracy's secret partner for 26 years. Their love was genuine but hidden. They lived together, shared a life together, yet never married. To the public, Tracy remained a devoted husband. Privately, he was split between 2 worlds. Hepburn accepted the arrangement without complaint, and in an extraordinary twist, even supported Louise's work, a clinic for deaf children that still helps families today. Tracy's story is not one of hypocrisy, but of human contradiction, a man torn between duty and desire, sin and salvation, and through it all, he remained one of Hollywood's most beloved stars. Proof that even the most revered figures often lead lives far more complicated than we ever imagine. Joan Crawford, Mommy Dearest or Mommy Deceptive. Joan Crawford wasn't just a star, she was the star. Fierce, glamorous, and ambitious, she defined Hollywood's golden era with her commanding presence and razor-sharp charisma. To the public, she was the picture of perfection, an adoptive mother of 4, a beloved leading lady, and the ultimate symbol of class. But behind the closed doors of her immaculate mansion, a much darker story was unfolding, one that would destroy her legacy forever. Her adopted daughter, Christina Crawford, later exposed the brutal truth in her infamous memoir, Mommy Dearest. According to Christina, life with Joan was a living nightmare. Beatings, screaming tirades, alcohol-fueled rage, and one unforgettable outburst immortalized in pop culture. No wire hangers, ever. Joan's iron-fisted control extended to every aspect of her children's lives, turning her home into a gilded cage. And yet the story is complicated. Her younger children denied the abuse, claiming their mother was loving and misunderstood. Adding another layer of scandal, 2 of Joan's adoptions were arranged through Georgia Tann, a notorious baby trafficker who sold children to wealthy families under the guise of adoption. But even monsters can have mercy. Joan quietly paid medical bills for strangers, mentored struggling actors, and treated every film set like a sacred space, memorizing not just her own lines but everyone else's too. She was a paradox, both cruel and kind, terrifying and generous. And that duality makes her one of Hollywood's most haunting figures. Bing Crosby, Mr. Christmas' dark father. To the world, Bing Crosby was warmth personified, the smooth voice behind White Christmas, the gentle father figure of countless films, and the man who made America believe in holiday magic. But at home, according to his sons, he was anything but magical. In his memoir, Going My Own Way, Bing's eldest son, Gary, described a childhood defined by fear, weekly weigh-ins, public shaming, cold, emotionless discipline, and if they didn't meet his standards, physical punishment. Bing's other sons backed up the claims, painting a picture of a household ruled by intimidation. The trauma ran deep. One of Bing's sons took his own life, citing years of emotional damage. And yet there's a haunting twist. Bing's second family told a completely different story. With them, he was warm, loving, present, the father he'd never been before. So who was the real Bing Crosby? Perhaps both. A man divided between old-school strictness and late-in-life redemption. A performer who could sing about love and peace while struggling to create either within his own home. Merle Oberon, the star who erased herself. Merle Oberon captivated audiences with her ethereal beauty and aristocratic charm, most famously in Wuthering Heights. Hollywood adored her, but the woman they thought they knew never existed. The studios claimed she was a British aristocrat born in Tasmania. The truth was far less convenient. Merle was born in Bombay, India, to a 14-year-old mother of mixed race. In 1930s Hollywood, that heritage would have ended her career before it began. So the studio buried it, literally. Records were destroyed in a suspicious fire, her birthplace was falsified, and her mother was introduced as her maid. The deception became her life. She avoided sunlight to prevent revealing her darker complexion, endured painful treatments to lighten her skin, and refused to return to Australia for fear someone would expose her. Even her own husband never knew the truth, but behind the lies was a deeply compassionate soul. Merle gave generously to children's charities and quietly supported those less fortunate. She lived her life performing a role not on camera but in reality, and in doing so she lost the most precious thing of all, her identity. Rita Hayworth, Hollywood's love goddess with a stolen identity. Rita Hayworth was the ultimate fantasy, sultry, exotic, and unforgettable. But the woman the world adored was not the woman she truly was. Born Margarita Carmen Cancino to Spanish-American parents, Rita was told from a young age that her heritage was a liability. Hollywood executives deemed her too ethnic, so they stripped her identity away piece by piece. They changed her name, dyed her hair auburn, and in one of the most grotesque acts of Hollywood's obsession with whitewashing, they burned back her hairline with electrolysis to give her a more Anglo appearance. The physical transformation was painful, but the emotional scars cut deeper. Rita carried childhood trauma that no studio could erase. From the age of 12, she was paraded around as a dance partner by her father, a man who allegedly abused her. The world fell in love with Gilda, the seductive screen siren. But Rita felt trapped. "Men go to bed with Gilda," she once said, "and wake up with me." That sentence captured the heartbreak of a woman whose identity was erased in service of an illusion. Fate delivered one final cruelty: early onset Alzheimer's. By her 40s, people assumed she was drunk or difficult. In reality, she was losing her memories, even the ones she never had a chance to heal from. In the end, the only part of her past that clung to her was her native Spanish, a final reminder of the self Hollywood had tried so hard to erase. Rock Hudson, the double life of a Hollywood heartthrob. In the 1950s, Rock Hudson wasn't just a movie star, he was the movie star. Tall, handsome, and effortlessly masculine. He was the embodiment of America's leading man. But his most carefully guarded secret was one that could have ended his career instantly. Rock was gay, a truth utterly incompatible with the rigid morality of mid-century Hollywood. When rumors started to swirl in 1955, his agent orchestrated a fake marriage to his secretary, Phyllis Gates. Overnight, Hudson became a devoted husband in the eyes of the press, a picture-perfect bachelor settling down. The marriage lasted 3 years. The illusion lasted much longer. Hudson dated men in secret, dodging paparazzi and gossip columnists, living a life split in two, romantic comedy hero by day, closeted man by night. But in 1985, he did something extraordinary. Diagnosed with AIDS, Rock Hudson became the first major celebrity to publicly acknowledge his illness, and in doing so, his truth. The revelation shocked the world, shattered stigma, and changed the conversation around HIV forever. Hudson's courage in those final years eclipsed every performance he ever gave. In the end, his legacy wasn't defined by who Hollywood wanted him to be, but by the strength it took to finally be himself. Clara Bow, the original It Girl, with a hidden hell. Clara Bow was the 1920s. The original It Girl, she embodied the spirit of the jazz age, daring, flirtatious, and free. But while the world saw a carefree starlet, Clara's private life was a nightmare. Born into poverty in Brooklyn in 1905, Clara's childhood was marked by violence and trauma. Her mother, suffering from mental illness, once tried to kill her in her sleep. Her father was abusive and neglectful. Hollywood offered an escape, but also a new kind of cage. Studios rewrote her backstory, burying the pain beneath a glittering persona. The tabloids obsessed over her relationships, branding her promiscuous and wild. In reality, Clara was battling PTSD, severe anxiety, and insomnia. By 28, she'd had enough. She walked away from the fame, the flashbulbs, and the constant judgment, choosing a quiet life in Nevada, far from the industry that had both made and destroyed her. Clara Bow wasn't just a star, she was a survivor. And her story reveals the brutal cost of fame in an era that demanded women smile while they suffered. Lon Chaney Sr., the man who spoke without words. Lon Chaney Sr. was known as the man of 1,000 faces, transforming himself into monsters and misfits with uncanny skill. But his greatest performance wasn't on screen, it was in the language of silence. Both of Chaney's parents were deaf, and sign language was his first language. He grew up in a world without spoken words, learning to communicate with his eyes, hands, and body. It was this unique upbringing that gave him an extraordinary ability to express emotion, one that would make him a legend of silent cinema. But Chaney's compassion ran deeper than performance. He fiercely protected his parents' privacy in a society that stigmatized disability. Even his first wife didn't know they were deaf until she met them. Lon Chaney didn't just portray society's outcasts, he understood them. His empathy for the misunderstood, the lonely, and the forgotten wasn't an act. It was his life, and through his work, he gave voice to those who had none. Gene Tierney, a life shattered by a fan. Gene Tierney was one of Hollywood's most captivating stars, elegant, luminous, and seemingly untouchable. But behind her mesmerizing eyes lay a life story so heartbreaking it could have been a movie script. In 1943, Jean was at the peak of her career and pregnant with her first child. Like many stars of the time, she participated in war bond events to support the troops. During one of these meet and greets, a devoted fan desperate for an autograph broke quarantine while infected with rubella. The fan got her signature. Jean got the virus. The result was devastating. Her daughter Daria was born blind, deaf, and severely disabled. The fan, completely unaware of the damage she'd caused, later bragged about meeting her idol, a chilling reminder of how one seemingly small act can alter a life forever. Tierney's heartbreak was unbearable. Unable to care for Daria herself, she placed her in a specialized institution, a decision that haunted her for the rest of her life. Publicly, she remained poised and graceful. Privately, she spiraled into depression, endured multiple nervous breakdowns, and underwent electroshock therapy that erased huge chunks of her memory, including moments with her second healthy daughter. Her pain was so raw, it even inspired Agatha Christie's novel The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side, which fictionalized her tragedy. Gene Tierney continued acting, but the vibrant light behind her performances was forever dimmed by a wound no one could see. Barbara Stanwyck, Hollywood's Ice Queen mother. Barbara Stanwyck was the definition of strength and sophistication, a woman who clawed her way from poverty to become one of Hollywood's most respected actresses. Fierce, hardworking, and disciplined, she was the embodiment of resilience, but motherhood was a role she never mastered. In 1932, Stanwyck and her husband, actor Frank Fay, adopted a baby boy named Dion. But their marriage quickly fell apart. Fay's drinking and volatility clashed with Barbara's relentless work ethic. After the divorce, she raised Dion on her own while juggling a skyrocketing career. Stanwyck provided everything money could buy: elite tutors, private schools, lavish comforts. But what she didn't offer was warmth. She was emotionally distant, more of a manager than a mother. As Dion grew older, their relationship grew colder. By his teenage years, they were practically strangers. When asked about him later in life, Stanwyck's response was chilling: "I have no son." And when she died, she left him just $5,000, the bare minimum to prevent a lawsuit. Rumors circulated that Dion struggled with addiction and legal trouble, but the truth remains murky. What's clear is that one of Hollywood's most formidable women built walls so high that even her own son couldn't climb them. It's a stark reminder that success in the spotlight often comes at the cost of connection behind closed doors. Jerry Lewis, the father who looked away. Jerry Lewis made millions laugh. He was slapstick royalty, a comedic tornado whose performances were larger than life. But off-screen, his real-life drama was no joke. In the 1950s, a woman named Susan Minaret claimed she was the product of a long-term affair between her mother and Lewis. She spent decades trying to contact him, writing letters, requesting meetings, even seeking a DNA test. Lewis ignored her every attempt. Science, however, told a different story. A 2009 DNA test revealed an 88.7% probability that Susan was indeed his daughter. But Lewis never acknowledged her, not in life, not in death. He even excluded her from his will, just as he excluded his 6 sons from his first marriage. The irony was cruel. While Lewis dedicated his career to raising money for Jerry's kids through his famous telethons, his alleged daughter lived in poverty and battled Crohn's disease. The man celebrated for his generosity on stage could be astonishingly cold in private. Jerry Lewis built a legacy on laughter, but for one woman, his silence was the punchline. Charlie Chaplin, genius and scandal. Charlie Chaplin revolutionized cinema. With a bowler hat, a cane, and a silent smirk, he became one of the most beloved figures in entertainment history. But behind the slapstick genius was a deeply controversial personal life, one centered around a disturbing pattern. Chaplin had a well-documented attraction to much younger women, and not just younger, but sometimes still in their teens. In 1924, at the age of 35, he impregnated 16-year-old actress Lita Grey, a co-star in The Gold Rush. To avoid a career-ending scandal, Chaplin rushed to Mexico, where laws allowed them to marry quickly and quietly. The marriage was a disaster. Lita accused him of emotional abuse, humiliation, and infidelity. Their explosive divorce became front-page news, with her 50-page complaint reading like a courtroom drama. Chaplin's history of relationships with teenage girls continued, often brushed aside by studio PR machines. And yet the same man accused of predatory behavior also created films that spoke for the powerless, the forgotten, and the oppressed. City Lights, Modern Times, The Great Dictator, all masterpieces filled with humanity and compassion. Chaplin's life was a paradox, a man capable of immense empathy on screen, who often showed far less of it in his own relationships. Gloria Grahame, the femme fatale who married her stepson. Gloria Grahame was the quintessential film noir siren, seductive, mysterious, and dangerously magnetic. But her most shocking role didn't unfold on screen. It happened in real life, and it scandalized Hollywood. In the late 1940s, Grahame was married to director Nicholas Ray. But their marriage imploded amid rumors of infidelity, and one allegation so explosive it nearly ended her career. Nicholas claimed he caught Gloria in bed with his 13-year-old son Tony. Gloria denied the accusation, and the scandal was buried under studio pressure. But years later, she reconnected with Tony, now an adult, and in a twist no one saw coming, they married. She was 37, he was 22. The press had a field day, studios distanced themselves, offers dried up. Grahame was effectively blacklisted, forced to rebuild her career in theater and television, and yet the marriage lasted 14 years. Friends described Gloria as emotionally fragile, a woman forever chasing the love and stability she'd been denied as a child. It's impossible to separate the scandal from the sadness. Her story isn't just about tabloid shock, it's about a woman trying, in all the wrong ways, to fill a void that never stopped aching. Ingrid Bergman, from America's sweetheart to Scandal's villain, Ingrid Bergman was the face of cinematic purity. After Casablanca and The Bells of St. Mary's, she was Hollywood's golden girl, beautiful, virtuous, and universally adored. But in 1949, she made a choice that would transform her from America's darling into its most hated woman. While married, Bergman traveled to Italy to work with director Roberto Rossellini. They fell in love, she became pregnant. And when the news broke, America turned on her. The US Senate, yes, the Senate, publicly condemned her. Churches boycotted her films. Fan letters turned into hate mail. Suddenly, Bergman was no longer the symbol of decency. She was a national disgrace. But she didn't hide. She divorced her husband, married Rossellini, and had 3 children with him, including future actress Isabella Rossellini. Far from Hollywood's judgmental gaze, Bergman created some of her most daring and artistic work. And when she returned 7 years later with Anastasia, the Academy awarded her an Oscar, proof that talent, integrity, and courage outlast scandal. Her story is a reminder of Hollywood's hypocrisy. The same industry that condemns women for following their hearts will later celebrate them for surviving the fallout. Errol Flynn, the swashbuckler with a sinister reputation. Errol Flynn was the ultimate Hollywood rogue, the charming sword-wielding hero of adventure films like Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood. Women adored him, men envied him, and studios couldn't get enough of his devil-may-care charisma. But behind the rakish grin was a man whose real-life escapades were far darker than any role he ever played. Flynn's reputation for debauchery was legendary even by Hollywood standards. His parties were notorious, filled with alcohol, drugs, and scandalous behavior that often pushed legal and moral boundaries. In 1942, he faced 2 separate statutory rape charges involving underage girls, accusations that could have ended his career, but Flynn was acquitted in a highly publicized trial, thanks in part to aggressive studio lawyers and a culture that often blamed victims instead of protecting them. The scandal did nothing to slow him down. In fact, it made him more infamous. In Like Flynn, a phrase born from the trial became slang for effortless sexual conquest. Yet, behind the bravado, Flynn was a deeply troubled man. He battled alcoholism, financial ruin, and a sense of alienation from the very industry that had made him a star. He died at just 50 years old, a man who had everything yet seemed to find peace in nothing. Judy Garland, the studio's victim. Few stories capture the dark heart of old Hollywood like that of Judy Garland. To the world, she was Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, innocent, hopeful, and filled with song. But her real life was a nightmare engineered by the very machine that made her a star. From the age of 13, MGM controlled every aspect of Garland's existence. They dictated her diet, giving her amphetamines to stay thin and barbiturates to sleep. They criticized her looks relentlessly, calling her fat, ugly, and unphotogenic. The studio even arranged dates for her to maintain a squeaky clean public image. By her late teens, Garland was addicted to the pills the studio had forced upon her, a dependency that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Her personal relationships suffered, her mental health deteriorated, and she struggled with depression and suicide attempts. Despite all this, Judy continued to perform with extraordinary passion. But the system that had exploited her talent offered no compassion when she faltered. She died at 47 from an accidental overdose, a victim of the very dream factory she helped build. Howard Hughes, the billionaire in the shadows. Howard Hughes was one of the most powerful men in Hollywood, a visionary filmmaker, aviation pioneer, and billionaire playboy. But behind the glamorous headlines and the reputation as a womanizer was a man consumed by crippling mental illness. Hughes suffered from severe obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD, a condition that worsened as he aged. At the height of his success, he became a recluse, shutting himself away in dark rooms, terrified of germs and contamination. He would obsessively wash his hands until they bled, refuse to cut his nails or hair, and live for months in complete isolation. Despite his immense wealth, Hughes's life became defined by fear and compulsion. He controlled every aspect of the lives of the women he dated, monitored their movements, and even dictated their appearances. His paranoia extended to his business empire, where he often made erratic decisions that baffled colleagues and investors. By the end of his life, Hughes was unrecognizable, frail, emaciated, and broken, a prisoner of his own mind. He died in 1976, leaving behind an empire and a cautionary tale about how even the most powerful among us can be undone by their demons. Fatty Arbuckle, the scandal that destroyed a legend. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle was one of the biggest stars of the silent film era, a comedic genius whose films broke box office records and helped define early Hollywood comedy. But in 1921, his career and his life were obliterated by one of the most shocking scandals in entertainment history. Arbuckle was accused of the rape and manslaughter of actress Virginia Rappe after a wild party at a San Francisco hotel. The press sensationalized every detail, painting Arbuckle as a depraved monster before a trial even began. He was tried 3 times, acquitted twice after hung juries, and finally found not guilty in the 3rd trial, with the jury even issuing an apology for the great injustice he had suffered. But the damage was done. Arbuckle's films were banned, his reputation was destroyed, and he became a pariah in Hollywood. Though he attempted a comeback under pseudonyms, he never regained his former glory. His story remains one of the earliest and most infamous examples of how scandal, whether proven or not, can annihilate a career in an instant. Arbuckle died at just 46, a broken man haunted by the weight of a crime he was never convicted of. Behind every smile on the silver screen, behind every polished red carpet pose, there are stories like these. Stories of trauma, secrecy, and unimaginable pain. The golden age of Hollywood was built not just on talent and beauty, but on deception, silence, and sacrifice. For many of these stars, the roles they played on screen were the easiest part of their lives. The real performance, the one no one ever saw, was pretending everything was perfect when their worlds were falling apart. These stories aren't just gossip from a bygone era, they're reminders of how fame can amplify suffering, how success can hide tragedy, and how even the brightest stars can be consumed by darkness. So the next time you watch an old Hollywood classic, remember, the magic of those films often came at an unimaginable cost, and the people who created them, the icons we still revere, were not gods or legends. They were human, fragile, flawed, and fighting battles we never knew existed. If you found these hidden stories eye-opening, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves classic cinema. And tell us in the comments which of these secrets shocked you the most, because the more we uncover the truth about Hollywood's past, the more we understand the human cost behind the spotlight.